Lads, welcome back to Fusion YGO. Today, I'm going to be showing off my deck profile for my Indianapolis Regional over the weekend, and I wanted to show it off, talk about some of the mistakes that I made so you guys can avoid the mistakes that I made in this event, and talk about some of the potential card choices and changes that will be coming to this deck in the near future. We'll get into that when we get into the deck profile, so we'll talk about it along the way. So let's go ahead and dive right in. Starting off with 3 copies of Aluber, the Jester of Despia. This is not changeable. This isn't up for debate. Like, this is a card you have to run at 3. It is the lifeblood of the deck, in my humble opinion. On normal summon, for those of you that don't know or not acclimated with branded, Aluber lets you search any branded spell or trap from their deck to your hand. Typically, it's going to be branded fusion, but there are instances where you'll already have it, so you'll be able to search something else. While it's in the graveyard, if a fusion monster leaves the field, you can target an effect monster your opponent controls, negate its effects, and special summon this card. You can only use one effect of Aluber the Jester or Despia per turn. So you can use this as protection as like a monster negate during your opponent's turn. You can use it as a search, which is always powerful. Aluber is a necessary 3. We are also running 2 copies of Fallen of Albaz. This is the other most important monster in the deck, really. It's super important. It's used for like half the fusions. Staying with the branded and Despia stuff, we are running 1 Blazing Cartesia the Virtuous. This card is a quick effect, is able to fusion summon. So one of the things you'll do, which I'll talk about a little later, is if you can get this out before summoning your Aluber, you are able to protect your Aluber from things like Infinite Impermanence, which can sometimes shut you down. Or it can protect your Lubellion from an Infinite Impermanence by fusion summoning with it and moving it around to protect it from those sorts of targeted negation effects. So being able to do that is actually really strong. Blazing Cartesia's fusion summoning effect is great. The secondary effect allows it to recur itself from the graveyard to the hand if a fusion monster is sent to the graveyard while it's there. There are a lot of ways you can move this card around a lot. I've recurred this card constantly. One of my biggest mistakes of the weekend was I forgot about this effect to return to hand. That's a me problem. That's nobody else's fault. It's just one of those things where you got to make sure you're not making those mistakes. Continuing with the Fallen of Albaz part of it, we have a Tri-Brigade Mercourier. It's a negate in hand, it's a hand trap. So if you're being able to hand trap your opponent to stop things like Ash Blossom and Nibiru and things like that, while you have a fusion monster that requires Fallen of Albaz as material, you can negate it. When it's banished, you're able to add a card a Fallen of Albaz or a monster that mentions it. Which includes Blazing Cartesia. The next card is Albion the Shrouded Dragon. So Albion the Shrouded Dragon is able to dump a branded spell or trap from your hand or deck while this card's in your hand or graveyard to apply an effect. So if it's from the hand, if the card that you dumped is from the hand, then you're able to special summon this card. If the card you dumped is from the deck, you get to put this card to the bottom of your deck, and if this card was in your hand, you get to draw a card. So really good effect. We also are running 2 more Despia names, 1 Tragedy. Its primary effect of searching is really strong, being able to add an Aluber or the next card. Its secondary effect, being able to banish itself from the graveyard to set a branded spell or trap, actually comes in a lot in the grindier games. So Tragedy is a must-have. And then we're running 1 copy of Ad Libitum, the Ad Libitum of Despia. So this card came up actually against things like Contact Sea. I went branded opening, summoned Aluber, added fusion. They Contact Seed me, but because I had dumped Tragedy with opening, I'm able to add Ad Libitum and then tribute both, summon Ad Libitum, and then just kind of go off. Ad Libitum actually came in clutch for the Contact Seed plays. For the branded spells, we have 3 copies of Branded Fusion. It's Branded Fusion. Branded Fusion allows you to dump Fallen of Albaz and a corresponding monster required for the fusion summon of a monster that lists it as material. You can only use Branded Fusion once per turn. It's ashable. It uses your hand, your field, or your deck. 3 copies of Branded Opening. Discards as part of the effect, which does matter for Tragedy and cards like that. Being able to discard a card, summon a Despia monster from your deck, and then get your searches off, always nice. We are then running 1 copy of Branded in red. You only ever need it, you're able to recur it in so many ways with things like Tragedy and a trap card called Retribution that we're coming up on. We're just able to loop this card pretty frequently if needed, so it's not needed at more than 1. 1 copy of Branded Lost. in my opinion, one of the strongest cards it's probably the strongest card in this deck. Your opponent can't negate the activations of cards or effects that would fusion summon, and in the resolution of a fusion summon, your opponent can't respond to it. So things like Trap Tricks just can't deal with this card. They have to deal with it first, because once you fusion summon, if they don't ash it, like for Branded Fusion, for example, if they don't ash it, they can't bottomless it or do anything like that to it. One copy of Branded Banishment. It's a super poly. If you're playing against a deck that uses dark monsters, you can use this to make things in the extra deck. It's really nice. And one copy of Retribution. It's mostly here for the graveyard effect. You were able to banish it to add a branded card from your graveyard to your hand. That does it for the branded section of the deck. It's pretty large, and I recognize that. In terms of this part of the deck, not a lot changes. However, we are approaching the part of the deck where things will change. The next up is the buy steals. I only ran Lubellion and Saronir. Lubellion is here to be able to make Albion when necessary, and also I'm able to combo into it to use to activate Branded Loss from the deck if I know I don't have to deal with a Nibiru. It's really nice. Saronir is another way to dump branded cards. So like if you have Albion the Shrouded Dragon and Saronir in hand, if you're able to get Saronir into the graveyard by an effect, you can basically just add whatever you want from your deck to your hand, and it's really, really useful. But I will say that I sided out of this card a lot. It's the buy steal's just at least in where I'm at, not super useful. We're running 3 copies of Nibiru. This is the worst card of the weekend. This card was like good in one game. It came up once. Every other time I was just like, I wish this was anything else. This card is one of the 5 cards that I'm planning on cutting from this list and changing it up a bit. So this is gonna become 2 copies of Super Poly, and it's also gonna become Infinite Impermanence and another card. Yeah, a couple of cards from the side deck are gonna get moved up to the main deck as well. So we are also running 3 copies of Ash. It's Ash. It stops Branded Fusion, which is the main reason it's here, but it does work really well against a lot of rogue decks. So this card, mandatory. It's silly good. And it's affordable, which is nice. We are also running 3 copies of Fusion Deployment. This is the card I was talking about. So if you open Fusion Deployment and Branded Opening, you are able to go, okay, summon Blazing Cartesia, then summon a Luber, or even if you just normal summon a Luber, it gives you the protection. So this card is really, really strong. 3 copies of Crossout Designator and a Called By. These are to stop exactly Ash Blossom and Joyous Spring. This can come up if you need to get to Lost. This can be important if you have to play into Nibiru. It gives you the option to play around it. In hindsight, I kind of wish I had things like Imperm in the deck. It's just wasn't one of those times. Crossout was amazing though. Crossout came up a lot. Every time I saw it, it was almost always useful. 1 copy of Dark Magician. You know what's coming. And then 2 copies of Allure, a copy of Gold Sark, and a copy of Foolish Burial. Allure was to help me dig. This is the other 2 cards that's coming out. There was so much consistency, I sided out of this card every single round. So it just wasn't impactful enough. So I'm gonna try to change that. Gold Sark and Foolish Burial are essentially extra copies of Allure. That does it for the main. Let's go into the extra. We are starting with 2 copies of Albion, the Branded Dragon. This card, insane. Being able to set branded spells or traps directly from the deck during the end phase it was sent to the graveyard, really good. The other really cool effect though is on summon, it fusion summons. So you're able to just kind of continue spiraling out of control. 1 copy of Lubellion. I never needed more than 1 of it. With so many Kashtira decks going away from the zone lock, this card becomes less needed at 2 and more needed at 1. Because if they imperm, like it sucks, but you can deal with it. Whereas if you have Lost on the field, you just kind of play around it. 2 copies of Mirror Jade. This card is amazing. It's in the extra deck. It's in the top 3 cards I used this weekend. Like the 3 most used cards I made this weekend. Mirror Jade is insane. It's probably the most used card of the weekend. The least used card of the weekend. This is going to become Albalenitis, but I was running Rinbroom because I was like, this could be really neat in select scenarios, but it never came up. Every time where this was going to come up, I was already in a winning position, so there was no point in it. I'd wish it was Albalenitis, so I had just a better dump. 2 copies of Masquerade. This did come up. Runic is something that I did deal with, but it also comes in clutch against things like Sky Striker, where they just have to pay a ton of life points, and it's one of those things that if they don't have the out, they don't have the out. And it's really hard to just out this guy. 1 Gragon Oil. This was another one of my most used cards. Card's insane. I love this card. So this allows you to get into Blazing Cartesia through fusion deployment, but then its other effect is it dumps a level 6 or higher light or dark monster from your deck or extra deck to the graveyard. Really nice. In this instance, I'm playing Garura for it, so I'll just freely throw that out there. I am playing Garura. It's a super poly target, but the reason it's here, the other reason it's here is for Gragunoil. I dump this, I get to draw a card. So I get to gain advantage off of the Cartesia effect, which is really nice. The other effect is if my opponent activates a card or effect that special summons, I'm able to banish this card from my field or graveyard and summon a Despia monster from the extra deck, which we're getting into the target, Queritus. This card's great. It drops everything to 0, really strong. If it's destroyed by a card effect, which this came up in the mirror, you're able to summon a Fallen of Albaz or a Despia monster from the deck to your field. And what I was able to do with this card was I was able to get it popped during the end phase, summon a Luber. A Luber added me a card, or no, I summoned Ad Libton, and then I was able to brand it and red, add another one, fuse summon, pop another card on their field, draw cards, and I started my turn with like 6 or 7 cards in hand, and I was so far ahead. Querites just led to that. 1 for Skenion. This card is getting cut for something. I'm not sure what yet. Yeah, this card never came up. It may stay just for a name, but right now my plan is for it to get cut. We are also playing Garura. It's Garura, card's insane, super poly target. I might, like for this, I might run Mud Dragon, just by the way. Garura though, drawing cards, always good. Double battle damage, really good. The game where it's super poly, like I opened double super poly, and I was able to go super poly into this, summon a Luber, make Mirror Jade, super like battle phase, crush their board, deal some extra damage, and then super poly, draw another card, put him in a bad spot, and Garura just led to that. 1 Dragostapelia. It's Dragostapelia. It's a negate. I didn't summon this weekend, but it was available. There just wasn't a good enough section for me to play it. Like it never came up. But against Sprite, this card's insane, for example. 1 copy of Dragoon. This is probably the best card of the weekend. This card's insane. Dragoon came up constantly. Card's nuts. And then 1 Guardian Chimera. It is super useful. Every time I was going to go into this though, I was in an already winning position, but I have had it come up in situations where I wasn't in a winning position and it wins me games. So it's one of those things where you kind of have to play it, but it doesn't always feel good to play it, because it doesn't always feel right, if that makes any sense. And like that's a weird way to feel about such a powerful card. For my side deck, I was running 2 copies of Contact C. This was mostly here for as a crossout target, but it also did come up against things like Sky Striker and other decks. I don't know, this card was underwhelming. I don't know if I'd use it again. We are running the Gimmick Puppet, but it's not the only expulsion target. We are also running specifically for trap decks, which it just ended up not playing, a copy of Jinzo. Yeah, so being able to brand a fusion and then make do the expulsion play to summon these out, you can typically do that in 4 summons to be able to play around a Nibiru. So like being able to summon Jinzo during your opponent's turn and get an Aluber Surge is really strong, especially for decks where they have to like have the cards to out this, and they're not typically siding in those cards against branded. So this card, the theory, and when I play against trap decks, this card comes up clutch. This just wasn't the event, and I will keep that moving forward. 3 copies of Book of Eclipse. This is a great way to bait Ash in Kashtira and stuff, but if you have this plus Crossout and a way to Aluber, you're probably winning the game. Like, it's insane. It's so good, this format. You have to play it. 3 copies of Super Poly. 2 of these are going to the main, 1 is staying in the side. That's what some of those cards are coming out for, is this. Super Poly was like one of the best cards of the weekend, and I only want to main 2, but I do want the 3rd here for board breaking, specifically for like if I know I'm going 2nd. We are playing a Feather Duster in the side. I just didn't have space to main it. I wanted to main this card. I'm kind of glad I didn't, because I never sided it in. Then 1 copy of Expulsion. This is getting moved to the main as well. The side deck, like I said, I'm working on the ratios right now, but this is one of those cards that I kind of wish I had mained. I just couldn't find the space for it. I was trying to prioritize getting consistency, and I completely just dropped the ball with Expulsion. And then 3 copies of Evenly Matched. I don't want to lose to back red eggs. And that is going to do it for my branded Despia deck profile. I really had a good time with this deck. In an event, in a situation where the format just isn't super fun, I did have a really good time getting to play branded again. So this is what I worked with. Yes, there are changes coming for this deck in the way, but I wanted you guys to see it. Let me know what you think in the comment section down below. And until next time, lads, good fun. Have luck.